Boom! Happy Friday, everyone. It is Gateway Office Hours. I'm Ben Larson, and here's Carter Laren, my esteemed associate and co-founder. How are you feeling today, Carter?
I'm in a lot of pain, but I'm on Percocet.
Well, thank you
if
for
I
being
collapse
here.
on the set, I apologize in advance.
Got it. Okay, so every week we have been here for the last 66 weeks. Well, one of us at least. We are going to try to mess with the format once again a little bit, not too much. We're going to continue to have the guests on. We're going to continue to give you advice, but we're going to start being very focused on the type of advice that we're giving you. So today we'll be talking about the why, which we'll get to in just a bit. But if it's digital marketing strategy, packaging, whatever it is, we're going to really try to drill down and give you the tips to help you build your business better. Basically the same stuff that we offer here at the program, but giving it away for free. Why do we do that? No one knows.
We're stupid, that's why.
Yeah. We're not good business people.
Right.
Couple points of news before we get to our guest. I just want to send a shout out to our good friend Pamela Johnston, formerly with Electrum. That's a whole other story in itself.
A can of worms.
Actually, go check out Brandon David's interview with her on investing in cannabis. He digs into it. It's fiery.
Actually, are we going to put a link to the Team Pammy
We are.
GoFundMe
It's
stuff too?
GoFundMe.com/Team Pammy. Support her. She's going through a tough time. Send her your love. She's very open about it. She's very real about it. So don't be afraid. A lot of times when people are sick, people don't know what to say to them, and so they avoid them. And that's the isolation can be pretty tough. So support Pam if you know her. If you don't know her, if you're a part of the cannabis industry, go to GoFundMe.com/Team Pammy and show your support. Other news, more cannabis related, I guess. The DEA is going to be facing some fire. I know you particularly like this topic, so I'll let you talk about it just a second.
No, I mean, I don't know a lot of details about it. I just, I know that they're being sued by Florida, which is beautiful.
Yes, go Florida.
I don't know how you win against suing the government, but my understanding, and granted, maybe someone else has more details, but I think they're basically, in order to maintain substances on Schedule 1, you actually have to have a reason. You can't just kind of default leave it on Schedule 1.
And you can't have previously funded studies that prove that it doesn't belong on Schedule 1, yet keep it there.
Right, so apparently Jeff Sessions is going to have to stand up in court and defend cannabis being on Schedule 1 and hopefully lose.
Get me some popcorn. That'll be a good one.
Yeah, honestly, I would rather have them lose in court spectacularly than decide on their own to remove it.
Yeah.
It's a pipe dream though. Who knows? I don't know how you beat.
A lot of things happening politically in the next year.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. Follow us, like us, and subscribe wherever you're watching this. Probably Facebook right now, maybe YouTube, or listening to us on the podcast. On the socials at Gateway VC.
Also, since we're switching to a format where we want to kind of start focusing on particular issues, if there's stuff that you want to hear and advice that you want in a particular area, just let us know.
Yeah. So, YouTube, podcasts, everywhere.
All right, there's a big bald guy to my right. Can we start talking to him?
Yeah, I suppose we can. He's somewhat important to us. Adeo Ressi, thank you so much for joining us today, the CEO and founder of the Founder Institute.
And the Funded, which makes you notorious.
Yeah. If you're not, if you haven't searched for funding, or if you're not in the venture capital world, you might not know what the Funded is. But essentially, if I had to put it short, it's like the Yelp, anonymous Yelp for venture capitalists, which was a major vehicle in bringing transparency to the venture capital world and daylighting the bad actors, right?
Who are returning in droves.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Adeo, we're super happy to have you.
Boom!
You played a huge part in both of our trajectories. Probably the reason we're standing here today at Gateway.
Somewhat standing.
Yeah, it's the reason I'm limping is because of you.
I love you anyway. So back to the Pam thing. I'll help you, man. I'm
Thank
not
you.
afraid to confront these things.
That's very sweet of you.
You have an amazing ability of distilling down entrepreneurship into kind of the simple building blocks.
Thank you.
In working with you over the years, there's just been one that has really shown through, and I think it's the first question that every founder needs to ask themselves, and that's why. Like, why are you doing this? Why are we here? Why should I listen to you? I think the quote that stands out to me the most is, without a why, you have no what.
Yeah.
Um,
When
that-
or where as well, but yes.
Right,
we
right,
know what.
exactly. So like figure
Or
out
how.
the why. You are good friends with Elon, and he has a similar quote about entrepreneurship that I just love, and I always put it up when I direct a Founder Institute program. And it's running a startup is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss.
Yeah, that's actually a quote from another friend of ours that he just took over called Bill Lee, who, basically it's a quote of entrepreneurship
Yeah.
that's super hard.
It's better than the quote that his brother said last week, which was,
Oh,
being an entrepreneur is
Kimball.
like chewing sawdust. And I was like, okay, so for you, it's like chewing sawdust.
Well,
Elon chews glass.
Smoking pot sometimes, yeah.
Yeah,
And walk over hot coals.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, it's super hard to be an entrepreneur, right? So if you don't have the why, you're kind of in trouble from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of people, and I'm sure it happens in the cannabis industry a lot, especially. It's like, oh, cannabis is cool, right? And that's great, but you can't build a big business because you think it's cool. You have to build a big business because it's in line with who you are and what you want in the world. Otherwise, you'll give up, right? Especially given the troubles with the particular, substance that is regulated.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've actually encountered founders where they seemed passionate about what they were doing and they thought it was cool, obviously.
Yeah.
But the pressure got to them. Like,
Every
the
day.
legality, the bank
Yep.
shutting down. Like, you have to have a good why to persevere and keep pushing through.
Particularly, yeah. And so you imagine being an entrepreneur, you have a million problems, and then being an entrepreneur in cannabis, you add a set more of problems that don't exist for normal entrepreneurs. Now there are also bigger opportunities but you do have more problems, so it's extra important to get the why right.
So can you break down a little bit more about, people say you need a good why a lot, but it doesn't have a lot of meaning to people.
Yeah,
It's like, what does that mean, right? And I, of all the programs that I've seen, the Founder Institute puts more emphasis and more focus and has done more work in teasing apart what that means than
Sure.
anyone else.
Well, I mean, let's start with some basic data. So we've created about 3,000 companies, and we have about globally, right now it's a 55% dropout rate, but probably historically it's been about 65%. If you look at the 20% of the companies that are not alive anymore, and you look at the 65% of the people that have dropped out over the years, it all boils down to the why, right? At the end of the day. Because a great entrepreneur does not give up, and ergo the company won't die because they're so motivated to pursue it that they'll stop at nothing. Right? So the company just won't die because they will not give up. And, I say you can't pivot the purpose of your life. And so going back to what the why is, it's really that. What's the purpose of your life?
This is interesting. I just, as a side note, one of my favorite other quotes of yours. We have a whole bunch of quotes, which I won't.
Yeah, most of them involve swear words and,
Yes,
yes,
and
you know
little
about the
monkeys.
Evernote?
I told them this morning about my list of quotes, but the one that I thought was really interesting, and I don't remember which media outlet did this, but you were among a short list of people who were interviewed about why founders fail, why do startups fail, and people had all their different reasons.
Money, market,
Right.
model, blah,
but your
blah, blah.
reason, I don't know if you want to repeat it right now, or do you want, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, you can go. I know.
Your reason was basically you looked they fail because the founder stops.
Yeah,
That's
they give
the
up.
only reason they fail.
Right. If you never gave up, the business wouldn't stop existing, right? It would just keep going. And now that goes both ways, right? There are some times where you're like, listen, buddy, it's getting a little pathological right now.
Right.
And you need, So I mean, so going back, but I think those people are actually not sane, and that's a whole other issue in the entrepreneurship community. But going back to what the why is for a moment. So, I can't tell you what, I can actually spot with most people roughly what their why is, because you can just sort of tell by observing people, the things they like, the things they do, the way they talk. It's sort of built into who you are. But back to the point, a lot of it's just self-examination. And, as you mentioned, Elon Musk is a good friend of mine, and we talk a lot about hard things, right? Because being an entrepreneur is hard. And he'll be the first to say, it's a journey even now at his level, right? Which is pretty much number one in the world, I would say.
Yeah.
It's a journey of self-reflection. Now that's journey of self-reflection starts when you're finding the why, but it doesn't stop. It's like, okay, I got the why, I'm done. Right. Close the book, because that motivation that keeps you going. So why isn't like a set moment in time. The why that gets you going on your journey is like the aiming of the gun, if you will.
So is introspection an important quality to have just as a founder generally?
I mean, introspection, self-reflection, self-awareness, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to say it's absolutely necessary, right? Because there's some really kind of not very introspective people that have been successful, possibly one that's running the country right now. But leaving all that aside, I think if you really want to stay passionate about what you're doing to the point where no matter what happens, you're able to wake up in the morning and go to work and get shit done, you need that self-reflection, because there's going to be times where you're like, what the heck is going on? And
so how do you discover a why? If you think about a lot of kind of cliche startups, like it's an app that helps you remember where you parked, or it's or Snapchat even, right? How do you get excited about my why is really around parking issues? Really?
So first, I know. So this gets tricky, right? Because a lot of times the business isn't necessarily an obvious reflection of the why. So that's where you can't point to a Slack. What's the why of Slack?
Right.
It's very hard to say, okay, the why of Slack is this. The why of the founder building Slack could be very clear. So I know a lot of the great founders of our time, like Pierre Omidyar, blah, blah, blah. And, Pierre actually came and pitched I was part of a venture fund around 2000. He brought eBay. Everyone turned him down. And I thought it was a great idea. But he was a Pez. He was a collector. He collected Pez, and it stands for East Bay, because they had a lot of Pez dispensers, and he collected Pez dispensers and other crap, and he's this avid collector. Wow. And so he built something. This was his passion. This is what he did all the time. It's what he loved. And so he built a tool to facilitate what he loved to do, right? Every day, every night. Now that's a pretty obvious one-to-one there, right?
Yep.
I'm a passionate collector. I'm going to build the biggest marketplace of collectibles.
You could take us, for example, right?
Right.
Everyone's like, why the cannabis industry? And it's not because I love smoking cannabis. It's not because, actually, before we launched Gateway, I wasn't super passionate about legalization. It was the fact that we love helping early stage founders, and it's where the greatest need was. There was new founders coming in. There's capital that was looking at the space, but there's a huge disconnect.
Right. Well, it plays right to the things that you guys love, right? And so being self-aware, so there are exercises you can do to figure out what you're, and these kind of, I'm going to tell you what they are, but it's not like after you do this, you will have your why. It's more self-reflection upon that. But writing your life story, that's a no-brainer, right? You start with where you grew up. Maybe you talk about your education, then you talk about your professional life, and then you say you're at this point where you're clearly self-reflective. So the last bit is why am I here? Because a lot of the times it's a narrative, and when you start writing your own narrative, it's I made these choices. Because, okay, let's be honest. A lot of times we don't make conscious decisions. Right? And then we go back and are like, I did that because of this. And it's just a lie.
Yep.
Right? But you're forming a narrative of your life. And so when you make that narrative choice to contextualize a random decision into your life path somehow, the formation of that narrative is teasing at your why.
Interesting.
Right?
So you have a whole set of exercises that you give founders early on to help them. That's the train.
Hello, train.
The train's why is just to interrupt everything.
Right.
So you have a whole set of exercises that you give early stage founders that kind of help them do that process.
We try.
Well, I think
it doesn't work all the time.
My favorite part of the process is just that initial meeting where, we've been conditioned to kind of ask this every time we meet a new founder. It's just why are you risking all of your relationships, divorce, financial ruin, just to do this project, and they kind of 90% of the time look at you like a blank face, just like, what are you talking about? I'm going to be super successful. And it's just like, yeah, probably not. Right. And even if you are super successful, you're going to go through all that.
Yeah, it's torturous whether you. So the two hardest times for an entrepreneur are when you're doing well and when you're doing bad. And that's counterintuitive. Everyone's like, oh yeah, when you're doing bad. But it turns out that it's almost as hard and difficult and challenging and not good for your social life and relationships when things are going really well as well. So it's kind of ironic.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, I mean, you have problems in both cases. The problems when things are going well actually are just as impactful as when they're going back, but maybe more, right? Because, oh my God, my CTO is quitting and we're growing like crazy. So
there's
problems
more at stake,
there's more at stake. There's a lot of then fakeness that goes on, like, oh buddy, man, I haven't seen you in forever. I hear your company's doing really great.
Suddenly you have friends that you didn't have before.
Right, and quickly they will disappear when you get the negative press cycle. They're like, whoa.
Yes. I've never heard of that happening, Theo.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, it happens to everybody. And so that's super annoying. And by the way, so your board and investors meddle like mad. It's like suddenly you're the chessboard for them. Right. They're like, oh, the company's doing really well. We should. I mean, just to bring up an example, and I'm not commenting on anything but the chessboard of the board dynamics, so to speak. The entire removal of Travis from Uber was a board manifested takeover.
Right.
So they could sell to SoftBank and get liquidity.
Right. And
that's
actually, our mutual friend Steve had to get involved and
sue
fight back. Right. Yeah.
So can you imagine? I'm not defending his behavior. I don't know if the allegations are true. I do know that they were largely planted, but I don't know if they're true or not. So I'm not making comment on that. But can you imagine you're running the most successful startup in the world, and they just come in when your parents have recently, one died, one seriously injured, and they fire you, essentially.
Right. So, that could be a whole separate show about choosing board members and how how to even choose board members.
But and you need. So let's go back to that example because I think it teases back to the why. Not defending his behavior or anything like that, but that's probably, think about that. Yeah. Biggest company on the planet for startup-wise. Parents, one dies, one's like in critical care. And, he's coming into work, he's making stuff happen, and the entire board is trying to push him out so that they can make a little money.
Right.
And you gotta wake up in this really sad place and come in every day. And if you're not self-aware and you don't have a good why, I mean, again, it's not all roses and I don't want to be sad, but that's why you need the why.
Well, I mean, we've witnessed it very recently in the cannabis industry itself. It's, Massroots was probably one of the more well-known startups in the space, and Isaac Dietrich was recently removed by this board. And, from what I've heard and what I've known, may or may not have been justified.
Most of the time it's not.
But regardless, he's a CEO who at one time, had an idea, and he started pushing it forward with all he had. And he was doing whatever he believed it was, and he got to that point where all of a sudden it became very hard. And imagine this self-realization that has to happen in that week following that decision, and be like, all right,
really
what am I going to do now?
Right.
So I'll give you another. Let's go back to the beginning. I'll give you another couple tips.
Dive into that.
So I want to be helpful to everyone. So all right. So write your narrative. That's a no-brainer, right?
By the way, is this related to Jordan now has the self-authoring thing online?
Yeah,
Is it related? Is it kind of a similar?
No. This is more. I mean, the self-authoring is very good too because you're writing your story from a lot of different angles. So in theory, it's based on the same principles.
Okay.
But by writing your story, with my example at least, what I'm trying to, you've made decisions and you're contextualizing them in a narrative, and the choice is to say why did you go to school? Why did you study what you studied? Why didn't you drop out? Why did you drop
Why'd
out?
you take this job instead of that job? or
Right,
whatever?
and that teases a little bit at the narrative of who you are that you're constructing to get to a bit of why you are constructing that narrative and why you're doing what you're doing now. But a couple other things. So, in no particular order. So I also like, free brainstorming about things and like throwing up ideas and looking at things you're angry about, things you do every day. Like I play video games every day. Things that excite you. Like, whenever I read about science, I get excited.
Right.
I'm like, that's kind of weird, but enjoy. So you can start looking and
Why's
then.
that weird?
So as you identify these categories of things that interest, upset, or excite you, etc., you can start identifying ideas, right? And then what I would say is, a lot of times founders bond to an idea prematurely.
I was just going to ask, when do you do the why? Because once you've bonded to an idea, doesn't it just kind of become a rationalization for like,
yes,
no, I am very excited about,
yeah,
discounted women's clothing online. Like, right?
And you're a 50-year-old guy.
Right.
It's like, and this is another problem. A lot of times people tether their identity to the business they choose, and they may have bonded to it too early.
Yep.
So my view on, so you have all these quote unquote ideas. We're actually renaming the concept of idea into what we call a customer problem. I can talk about that in a moment, but let's call them ideas for right now. And then you pick one, right? But what I would recommend is like try it on, right? Don't
commit.
Don't commit. So go tell some people, I'm thinking of starting a business to grow frogs and turn them into food. And if your friend are like, that's cool, it seems like a great thing for you to do. You love frogs, you go to France and eat frog legs. I mean, that sounds like your kind of business. Then you're getting that reinforcement from the world. If people look at you like, what are you talking about? Then you're getting reinforcement. And then the nice thing is, if you haven't committed, people who prematurely commit, they also then are like, no, but the frogs are the best.
Right.
And it's like, you start fighting, you need to listen.
So this is something that I remember, I know you've changed the curriculum since we were directing, but I do remember that you would force people to have multiple ideas.
3.
Right?
Yeah.
And I remember the people who had bonded to their one.
Yes.
Like those other 2.
Because they were annoying.
Like a lot of pushback on it. Like, I don't want to have another idea. I found my thing. And
or they were like just super shitty, so they knew they would fall
exactly,
off the list.
right, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or they pick bad ideas as the backups,
Yeah.
right? But this goes back to being self-aware, and you really have to genuinely, even though you may love one, be able to look at a pantheon of ideas with an intellectual honesty to say, okay, I'm going to actually try this. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to actually try something else. And I'm going to give you a hack at when looking at the idea. So when you have an idea and you're trying it on, one of the things that I always do with founders is like, okay, why do you want to work in this? And they'll give me an answer. It's, well, I really like children. Why do you like children? Well, and it starts getting hard fast.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
like 2 Y's in.
I have a couple, cousins that are young and I like taking them. So do you have any children? No. So you didn't really give me a good answer of why you like children. It's like, well, because, and usually if you can't get through about 4 or 5 recursive why questions down to like, why are you working in sports? Well, I'm an athlete. I really love working in sports. Well, why are you an athlete? What excites you about being an athlete? I like to challenge myself and stress my body and push my limits. Okay, well, why do you want to push your limits? And if you get and you start hitting dead ends about 3 in, that's not good.
Yep.
You should be able to go 5 to 7 recursive whys, and basically then it's just like that. Because I am that. Like, you get to the point where it's like, it's just me.
You reduce it to some kind of
yeah,
self-evident
right
at that point. And
it's just me.
Right.
It reminds me of a lot of the fashion startups that would come into the program, and it would be
I'm
like,
thinking of one in particular. But
well, day one I was like, you better be the best damn dressed person in
so
this
he's
room.
who I was thinking of. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
every time you show up, it's like, otherwise it's
Right,
inauthentic.
but they dress like a slob.
Right,
Right.
Right.
Like-
No, in fact, it was Sean. We won't say his last name, but I forget which mentor it was.
Yeah.
But one of the mentors, he was doing a fashion startup, and the mentor basically just ripped him apart for not being dressed well.
Right. Wow.
And they were like, well, if you're doing a fashion startup, like, I don't see, basically it was like, I don't see the why here. I don't see this as part of you.
Well, it's really
Right?
funny. So, so I'll tell the converse of that. So I had a kind of schlubby friend who built, but he's an algorithms guy, and he's like built a shopping algorithm, and I hadn't seen him for like a year, and he walks in the room and he's like fit and like dressed really well, and I was like,
What the hell
what the
happened?
fuck? Yeah, like, what's going on? He's like, listen, I love algorithms. I'm doing this because of my passion, but I'm running a shopping site. If I come in like in a
You're a
ripped
walking billboard.
t-shirt and I look like a schlub, like no one takes me seriously. And so yes,
Right.
I mean that's super. There are things that you may do. There are things that will bring you to a business. And again, the business might not reflect exactly the why that brought you there, but you still have got to be in that business, right? And represent that business correctly in how you look and how you talk, how you think,
Yep.
et cetera. And that's
This is transitioning into kind of the why. Like, it's like, why does it matter, right? Like, obviously pushing through is important, but there are certain points in the trajectory of the startup where people start to interpret what your why is, and getting an investor is probably one of those things. You walk into the room and they're looking for more than just a good idea. They're looking at the team and you as a spokesperson for the team, and that's where I think the why shows in the most. So,
well, they'll interview the crap out of people to make sure that your why is right. So they literally, I've had VCs call my relatives. That's not uncommon, actually, especially at a certain level. They want to make sure that you're not, they want to make sure you're genuine about what you're doing.
Right.
I want to go back, though, because there's another side of the why that we haven't covered here that I think is sort of, in many ways, more important, which is why people should be doing entrepreneurship at all.
Yeah, I was good.
Right?
Thank you for going there, because I wanted a lot of the founders people are not. They have a full-time job and they're kind of considering, should I even do this?
But I mean, for anyone out there, so yeah, if you made the decision to go into entrepreneurship, then all the stuff we talked about before is right. But there's like, why even do that?
Yeah.
Why now? Look, I can be very precise on that. So the world is fucked up. Okay, like
Less precise than I was hoping, but
yeah. So
Go ahead.
We can go through pretty much every category: politics, which we opened the show with; healthcare, which we also opened the show with; transportation, which is interrupting us on the show; living. Oh, this is pretty awesome. So you guys got living and working is often. I mean, you probably live 10 miles away at least.
about that.
Living and working.
About 7 miles away. Roughly.
Okay, so living, that's not too bad, but most
25
people
miles.
live, the average commute is 30. There's so many problems of the world, right? And not enough people are doing anything to solve it. And you know what they're doing? They're doing stuff that is going to be eliminated by robots or AI. So they're sitting at a desk, packing away an Excel sheet,
Everyone's getting very depressed
entering
right now.
TPS reports that within 1 to 5 years will be replaced by AI, or they're taping boxes and throwing it into a bin, which will be replaced by a robot. For sure.
Right. So this is actually interesting because I think we're touching on a bunch of stuff right now. One is, a lot of people view entrepreneurship as a riskier path than, like, let's just we'll go back a generation and say like my parents or your parents, right? You get a job out of college, and your goal was to just stay with that company your entire life and like get.
Well, that was a few generations ago, maybe 3.
I
But
don't know.
yeah, not
my
that
dad
much.
did that, right? Stayed like whatever, right?
Well,
And
you're have a child, so that would be.
okay, whatever. Yeah. So a couple generations, whatever, right? So, you get to like stay at the job, and it was viewed as very stable.
Yeah.
Right. And entrepreneurship is viewed as risky, which it is. Right.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But as we kind of go through a rapid change in society, those jobs actually aren't as stable as you might think they are.
No, they're gone.
Right. So yeah, maybe a robot will come back in 5 years and take your job. So you're not actually as stable as you thought. And there's this kind of inevitability to, look, your life is going to get disrupted somehow.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's better to be at the forefront of that disruption, to have it disrupted in the way you want it, right?
Well, look, so I'm going to give another theory on labor, and it goes back to the why, and it even goes back to entrepreneurship. So you're 99% baristas, like whatever you do, your job's gone. It may not be gone
Cafe X.
short, right?
Right.
But it could be gone in 10
Eventually.
years. It's going to be gone. And so then why are you doing it, right? And when you start answering those for the money, like, okay, the other way. So then you're gonna.
For a lot of people, though, I think that's the reason. It's like, okay, and they can pay bills.
Right. So, but that job's going away.
Right.
So they're gonna need to transform their life sooner or later. Either you wait for it to happen, or you be proactive. And then you go through this why discovery process and say, oh, I need to be probably doing this with my life, have a purpose. And then back to entrepreneurship, I believe in the concept of working for someone is gone. It's being replaced by the concept of working with someone. And of course, it's a little tricky. I went to Elon one night when I had this realization, and I was like, I was with a group of people, and I wasn't articulating myself incredibly well because it was like, oh, look at people are maybe. I've
had that conversation with you before.
Don't you translate really well. And so one of my friends who's an astronaut, ironically, Richard Garriott, I'm like, so do people, and he's like, here's what he's asking. Do people work with you or for you? And Elon was like, they work with me. There wasn't even a question.
Right.
And of course, I'm trying to articulate this like a bumbling idiot. He's like, I don't know what Adeo's asking me. And we're just like, do people work with you or for you?
Yeah.
He's like, they work with me. Now, of course, some people work for him. But, I think the paradigm is moving to people working with people on a shared vision, which goes back to the why.
I was going to say, it's just a way of thinking about it, right? It's this idea of thinking about, even if you report to me in a structure, it's a mutually beneficial voluntary relationship that we have, right? And it's, you don't have to be working at my company. You could be working at Adeo's company. And therefore, it's kind of this joint agreement. It's with, right? Yeah.
Right. And so when you move into the with paradigm as a mindset, which the world is moving, I think companies are being replaced by what I'll call communities, for lack of a better word, where it's not so much and that goes back to a lot of the problems that plague the world today relating to women. A lot of the structures that have been built by men, and they're very militaristically based, so they're
Very
command and control. And that's it. The model works okay if you're doing like DHL, which is like, we need to get packages, and like you need to go here. But like if you're starting, and the sort of a lot of those jobs are going away, a lot of those companies are going away. So now we're moving to a different kind of world, and that with paradigm and the community paradigm, getting away from the male-led paradigms of the past, is the future. And so either you're going to be disrupted out of existence, right, and become some sort of crazy right-wing person, or you're going to be conscious about what you want to do, come to an answer of why, and then you can make a decision. You don't have to start a business, but you could work with someone.
Oh, this is the kind of thing I want to be. These are the
Yeah.
kind of people I want to be working with, and the kind
Right.
of thing I want to be working on. Yeah.
You don't have to start a business. Like,
Right.
you know, and that's another thing. I think a lot of people today, and Phil Libin, who's a prolific mentor, he started this thing, I think it's called 100 Turtles or something like that, based on the...
Oh, yeah.
and
don't remember.
All Turtles.
All Turtles. Yeah.
And you know what he's doing? He's building companies without CEOs and companies.
Right.
It's just like, you create a product, it will be like...
So this actually relates to other stuff that we like to talk about, which is the blockchain, frankly. But you know, really quickly, one thing.
Talk about something that's going to disrupt a lot of
Right.
stuff.
But one thing to note about the command and control structure is, aside from it, you know, being sort of antiquated and just
Fucked
different
up.
than with, right? It's also not the way to maximally mine the resource of the human brain.
Oh,
Right,
it's
because you've got
terrible.
like a brain at the top, and everyone just listens to the brain, right? Or the management's kind of considered the brains, and you just do what you're told.
Right.
And that's horribly inefficient, because the brain is the most
Valuable
valuable
asset.
asset that you've got as a company, and companies that can kind of get everyone engaged and actively contributing their mind
Right.
share have a much better potential to succeed. Which is why I thought about blockchain. I mean, there's this kind of idea of like an autonomous organization,
Yeah.
right, where there's not really a CEO. There's a kind
That's
of,
called holacracy, is one of the most popular.
right, and there's like a
versions.
a directive on the blockchain for certain functionality, and people contribute or they don't, and they're kind of part of it. And I
The
don't know that
blockchain-
anyone's actually done it well, but
Well, so-
that's the theory.
So, you know, okay.
We're going to go blockchain.
Well, I'm going to talk about...
We should
for-
limit it, but we'll go blockchain
Well,
for a
so
minute. Yeah,
for
yeah.
1 second, like, okay, currency and governance within the systems that I broadly refer to as crypto. So I think blockchain is a technology.
I was actually talking about blockchain, not crypto necessarily.
Right, but
yeah.
I want to go up to crypto.
'Kay.
Because I think if you stay too much in blockchain, you know, parceling out what is a currency versus a governance thing can be tricky. But the best examples of governance are with the currencies. And I think sooner or later, so, you know, a friend of mine, Brock, just released a new currency, and the concept is it has a fixed inflation rate, and that gets allocated based on a vote of the members. So the members could vote to take the inflation rate of the currency, so there's no mining
Wait,
and
what
burning.
one? Which one is this?
I'm going to mess it up because it's
Okay.
I forget the name right now, but and I don't want to get it wrong.
That's fine, yeah.
But and the members vote on where they could vote to give it to themselves,
Right.
and then all 5% would go to all the people, or they could vote to invest, start a VC fund, or whatever they want to do, right? And that's it's a finance system, but it's a governance system as well. And by the way, so
Right.
let's go back to things being disrupted. Finance
Clearly.
in a big way,
Yep.
probably more than we've ever seen, and I don't think we're anywhere near.
No.
This is like FTP, right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. If that.
Right. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Gopher.
Yeah, yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then, well, FT was before,
was before
Gopher,
Gopher,
yeah.
that's- yeah.
But and then, you know, government.
Right.
Governments, of all the industries of humankind, government's in deep doo-doo. Representative government has just completely gone to the toilet with the
Well,
doo-doo.
yeah,
The-
and
the
I think
latest
that's
Politico
pretty clear
article.
that we're like the confidence level. Well, I mean, actually, another one. So both government and media
Oh,
have
media-
like
but media's
massively
been
low. Right, but actually,
But unfortunately,
it's
they're
not
correlated
actually-
for quality.
They're still kind of like zombies. They're not quite dead. They're still-
Media, well, government isn't
they're,
dead.
They're moving around.
Sadly. But, you know, part of the problem with representative democracy is a pillar of it is a good media brand or good media.
Independent, objective
Media,
media
correct.
is super important.
Thank
yes.
you for articulating that better than I can. You know, it's the weed coffee.
Yeah.
So
blame
to you
the
by
blame the
Somatic.
weed coffee.
let me chug some of that. I'll get really articulate fast. So an independent media keeps a representative democracy in check because it's like, look, this guy's stealing money. Look, this guy's like
Right.
imprisoning people incorrectly. We don't have media functioning anymore.
No.
In America. It's broken. It's like you got right-wing media and the media companies are owned by people with an agenda because they can't make money. So if you have an agenda, what do? You buy a media company.
I mean,
And
yeah,
they're boosted by Russians,
if
right?
you look at I just saw a survey the other day of like kind of people's view of the media, and it's like there was I don't think any outlet on the list had like this kind of people viewed them as objective. Like people are either like, oh, Fox News, they're very biased to the right, or people are like, oh, NBC, they're biased to the left.
Right.
Like there was no media outlet that the majority of people were like, yeah, they're pretty straight shooters. Like none of them.
None, right?
So
well,
no one trusts the media.
Well, and with good cause. And then what ends up happening is you have Twitter, which and I think that's a beautiful thing in principle.
I was going to say conceptually, it's
conceptually, right?
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing in practice.
Right.
It's like you're an astral.
Right,
it's like, oh, thanks for calling me that. That made my day.
Right,
and then it's like
that was productive.
Trump calls North Korean leader astral, and it's like, and then. I mean, so we're in a transitional phase where a lot of the tools that are breaking the systems are broken themselves, right? But I mean, media, politics, back to crypto and finance. I mean, it's,
They're
and
all
I don't
related.
think people understand how quickly this is coming. Right, I think they're sitting around.
Retitle this to Doomsday episode.
No, it's not.
No. But I agree with you. But like,
It's not a bad thing. I mean,
all disruption is bad for someone.
It doesn't need to be though.
It's bad for someone.
In this case,
Right.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't need to be. It does not need to be.
I don't know. I can't think of examples in history where like, look, even if you do something
Well,
good,
okay.
the bad people that were profiting from the thing that you just stopped, like it hurts them. That's okay.
Well, or they can be part of the solution.
yeah.
Right? So you're either part of the problem or part of the solution, which goes back to the why and self-awareness. If you're holding on to something that's going to die because you're closed-minded and ignorant or whatever else, it's your decision, right? But it doesn't have to be bad because you could be running. Look, I know how to make a media company profitable. You know why? I ran a profitable media company. So on the internet in '94. So
94.
in '94, we were like, "What's an ad on the internet? I don't know. Let's make one." And
I was like, who am I taking to the junior high dance?
I'm not saying like I'm a genius or anything, but these media companies are doing like dumb things that have no chance of success.
Right. Well, they're
And
dinosaurs that are not. They're not adapting.
Right, but they don't need. But that's a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think anyone who's working today, even before you start thinking about your why, you may be like want to ask the question like, is the thing that I'm doing right now going to be around in a few years
Fair.
for real?
Yeah.
Like,
So look, I don't want to sound. You know that I'm a capitalist, so I don't want to sound like too.
you're kind of a.
Don't get me too. I'm not going to go too crunchy on this, but
I'm a capitalist. That's how you open.
Can we put the 5-second
I know
delay
you're
on, please?
a lot of things,
wait.
Carter. Capitalist was not the first thing that came to mind.
Oh,
but sure.
man.
Fine.
He's caveating himself. This is bad.
no. I think there's
Everyone, back off.
there's an assumption for smart people in Silicon Valley tend to assume that everyone is
Like them.
easily malleable and can like, don't you know your job's going to be dead in 5 years? Do something else and learn something. And like, that's not it's easier said than done for a large percentage of the population. And I think it would behoove us to recognize that that can be a painful process. The transition is going to happen, but it's a little bit callous to be like, oh, you've been working on an assembly line for 30 years. Learn Java.
Well, let's use an example. Let's take a hypothetical example. A car mechanic. All right. Most car mechanics that I know that are good tend to be very like crazy. They have a different kind of mind where they can look at something and they may have never even seen it before. Figure out how it works and isolate where the problem is, and it's like a really unique skill, right? The good ones.
Yep.
I mean, now that
there are a few of those, just to be clear.
there's lots. They're quite, but they're
Okay.
the concept of fixing machines is not going to go away. In fact, the concept of fixing cars is not going to go away for a long time. The concept of having a garage in the middle of nowhere, that may be an asset. That might go away,
Right, yeah.
right? And so you don't have to change. Some things you won't do anymore, but really most of the things that you're not going to do anymore are just stupid things to begin with. But let's say going back to the mechanic, we're going to need mechanics for a long, long time. We're going to need mechanics on Mars. We're going to need mechanics on Earth and everywhere else. So you can keep doing what you're doing. You should think about what might change and where that can lead you. And rather than finding yourself when your garage shuts down for one reason or another, and you're like, why did this happen? It's like, well, be a little bit proactive and think about the future, and you can still do what you're doing. It's not a massive retooling.
So switch from fixing cars to fixing the robots that will be taking other people's jobs.
Or
fixing the robots that are fixing the cars.
Right, yes.
or make a mobile car service, because my guess is when a car breaks down in the future, it's going to be a driverless car, right? And you're going to be like, ooh, and pull over, and you're going to need to go to them, right? Or, maybe towing is different. You just think a little bit about how your profession looks in the future, and you don't need to retool. You may just need to redesign a little.
I think it's very optimistic, but I will hope that's true. I want to get back to the why really quickly.
Sure.
How do you know whether you've got a good why, though? Like, we go through the exercise. I've done the things in the Founder Institute, and I did here's my narrative. How do I know whether how do I know when I'm done or I have a good why?
So there is only one test, and here's the interesting thing. So I can ask you the recursive questions. You can give me a great narrative, blah, 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 and that can literally all be bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, suddenly I get jack, and it's like, boom. And remember, I said 20% of the people that graduate are dead.
Yep.
And if you ask me, at least half of those, 10%, and I think it's more like 14 to 15%, just kind of fake righted their why.
Right.
And then
they lied to themselves.
They lied to themselves or got a good story going, and they sort of pulled through. And so the only way you know is to really the test of difficulty, right? I mean, I know you guys have busted your ass to make this thing happen.
Literally,
right? Yeah. You should see the crutches holding him up.
I've got pictures.
So, you really and you has your why been tested?
Yeah. Our why's definitely been tested.
Right.
Ask Diane.
Every week.
Did it hold?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's it.
Right.
The only way
when we started, there was like I signed a lease on this building before we had a company, and we were personally responsible for rent and lost a bunch of money at the beginning.
No, I know. I remember
we went
because
through
you
some
found
horrible,
the building
horrible
and you're
times. Yeah.
So there's that comes through also at different stages of building your business, right?
Right.
And I know we often push people to go out and recruit a co-founder. Everyone wants to go and get money, but it's like, well, first stage, and it's a similar pitch, go find a co-founder. And that's what the co-founder is evaluating the most is when they're listening to you. It's like, you check the cool idea box, you check the scalability, but it's the why and your vision of the future, like you were talking about, being future focused. And how do you portray that why? Some people are just really great at it. I know a couple of people sitting here.
I was thinking of Jacob and you were
Jacob
one of the guys that we
JP,
said go find, but we told to go find a co-founder.
Oh, right.
And it was the thing that we don't question about him is his why. It's okay,
he
clearly
found a co-founder
he's
in
never
2
going to
weeks.
stop. Whether he'll be successful or not, I don't know, but he's never going to give up. And
Right.
he'll be living in Tent City, still making juice.
Tent City.
He'll still be making hemp juice. Yeah,
Hemp tent.
So, going back to the you asked how do you know and how do you articulate it? But I want to go back to how you know, because trial by fire, unfortunately, doesn't always happen as quickly as you probably need. So the best way to do it early is to provide yourself with artificial deadlines and hard objectives.
Ooh,
right? So if you think you have something good and you really are passionate about it, or at least you convinced yourself that you're really passionate about it, set yourself in a stupidly difficult deadline, an absurdly hard thing to do. That you're like, there's almost no way that I'll be able to do this.
A special assignment of sorts.
Yeah, a special assignment. Well, you know, a lot of our program is actually designed around testing this out.
Yes.
So that you wash out because you're like, I can't do it. It's too hard. Well, no one would ever say if they were like, I can't do it. It's too hard. If they were doing the thing that they love,
Right.
They just would never say that. They would be like, I got to figure out how to do it because it needs to get done.
Right.
You would never be like, oh, I can't do it. You'd be like, how do I do it?
And you know, we've had feedback from founders before, or actually non-founders before, but people who've gone through the program, and I know you have as well, where actually finding out that you don't want to be a founder
This is a good thing.
is like super valuable.
Yeah.
You know, like this program was valuable because it made me not quit Google. It's like, okay, like great. I realized
Not quitting Google is a smart decision for many people.
Right.
They
Right.
actually care about things like the why-ish, you know, as big companies can. They're on the more caring end, if you will. Yeah,
I don't know. I think they've embraced their original
More
the
than
opposite
McDonald's.
Their opposite of their do no evil is like now
Yeah,
just do evil, but just get away with it.
But so really tough tests, right? Test your own resolve.
Yep.
And that's easy to say, test your own resolve. It's like, but you know, you see athletes do it all the time, right? They're like, they run something really difficult and they're like, I'm going to do better. And it's
Right.
like really possibly the limit of their capability and they strive to do better. So almost think of it like an athlete. Try to do something that's harder than anything you've ever done before in less time than anything you've ever done it in time-wise, and then be like, you're going to be like, I set this deadline for myself. It's totally stupid. Why am I doing this? But if you're starting
If
to
you respond
question
that way,
that,
then that's your answer.
it's a hint.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen such obvious positive results out of those tests at the Founder Institute.
Oh,
like, half of the people get kicked out of the program because they don't complete it, but the people that do come back and be like, thank you. Like, I've actually realized that I can get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time, and that I learned this, this, and this about my company in like a 3-day period.
And you know what I actually think they're saying when they say that, Ben? And I hear that a lot too. I think they're actually realizing that, and this is another kind of interesting thing, you can do like superhuman things if you're pursuing your why. When that alignment is together, you can do superhuman things. You can do anything. You set your mind to it, and you can get like crazy amounts of stuff done.
Yeah.
I mean, you look, Founder Institute, great, but we're in 200 cities, and like we touch 100,000 people in person per year that come to our physical events, and it's just a manifestation of my why and the ability to do. And we by the way, we have a team of I think now 18 people. That's like nothing, right, for that level of scale. But when you have your why right, you can do superhuman things.
Yeah.
Right? Literally.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of people maybe are used to having a regular job where they actually don't have a good why they're even at the job, and so that's this like the idea of being maximally productive. They may not even have experienced for decades what it was like to be super productive because they're just not used to it.
Well, you know, this is you're touching on something that is an issue in the world in a bad way. I mean, I think the massive...
I knew I could get you to go off on
Carter and
Brad's
darkness.
coming.
He's
point.
like... No, it's at the eye and like, come through the darkness.
Amiyago, like whispering in your ear.
So most people are asleep at the wheel, right? And that's unfortunate. And disruption is going to wake them up, and so that's why I think it's also now an important time that people start an awakening on their own, rather than being woken up by a cold pail of water being poured on your head.
Right.
So it's gonna come. Hopefully they can wake up on their own, and they're asleep. And not only that, I think they don't. To your point, you know, even people that are sort of in that sort of waking out of bed, their productivity levels are very low.
Yep.
It's shocking.
Yep.
And so, and then they don't realize all that they can do. I mean, we got 7 billion people, really more, on the planet today. We have a lot of problems, but there are more bright minds than there are problems in the world to solve.
Absolutely. Sure.
Literally.
There's more bright minds now than there ever have been.
Right. Well, if you
Right, I
look
mean-
at every great advance of humanity, it's probably been by, and a friend of mine gave me this stat, but it's probably less than 10,000 bright minds throughout humanity have created some of all of this, right? And they're and the entire population over history is less than there are people alive today. So it's very likely that there are the greatness of humanity's history alive right now.
Yeah.
But I think it's not just that. I think everyone has greatness, right? I don't think it's like we need the next Jita Boo.
Jita. It's just-
No, Jita.
all
Jesus,
the religions
Buddha,
together, it's a
Muhammad.
Jita.
Yeah, right.
Jita is the...
Jita boo.
So, and you know, we don't need that type. I think that everyone has a purpose, and everyone can do something meaningful in the world, and make the world better. And it might be not, you know, solving a genomic issue of cancer. It could just be being a really good caretaker of a child.
Right.
Right. It doesn't. You
Frankly,
know,
I think that's one of the things that we need more than anything else. But that's a
More
separate-
now.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. So,
All right.
look, we've only got a few minutes, but I wanted to do.
Wow, that flew by.
I know. But I want to do Q&A because I'm sure there's people that have questions for you. So, Princessa, do you wanna kick it off? Michael will try not to show the. Oh no.
I definitely
he is showing you. Sorry.
have a question. You mentioned earlier that the male paradigm is being disrupted out, and what I'd like to see go with them is the biasness that exists around minority entrepreneurs. And I'm wondering how, you know, what you think can happen to create a more inclusive environment.
Well, you're a majority in some entrepreneurial markets and a
Not in
minority
Silicon
here.
Valley.
No, I know. I mean, we deal. So I bring that up not to make a joke. We operate in 200 cities, and so we don't look at. We can't even say the word minority. What we say is disenfranchised minority, because sometimes they may even be ethnically the same, and they have a different last name, and they're discriminated against in a certain country. Sometimes it's religion, and they're the same ethnicity. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people get disenfranchised. And the migrant crisis right now is probably a direct result of that, right? And so while it's bad here, it's a lot worse in some other places. Now, with that said, all I can do is what I can do, and so I have no racial biases, I have no gender biases, and I try and live in a world that does not have those biases as well. So we graduate 40% last 12 months, female-led businesses worldwide. We had 100% female-led business come out of Afghanistan, Kabul, and we have a lot of classes right now with 50% in them. And I think we have eyes on a world where we're creating 50% women-led entrepreneurs. I was out last night, and I met a woman who worked at Morgan Stanley, and she just went over to the venture capital world. I was in a session on Tuesday. We had 3 mentors. All 3 of them were women, right? And it's one of the first times I've ever seen 3, senior women at once. You might see 1 or 2. And it was the entire group, right? So you're seeing the seeds of change happen today. More people at the bottom of the pyramid, more women, more minorities coming up, more people in the middle. The top is still tough, but listen, it's changing. The time has come, and it's an unfortunate fact that it still exists, but you can look at the bright side that it won't be there for much longer, I hope.
Any comments on? Oh, you give him a 5.
Oh, 5. All right.
Really, we have a 0. There's a 0 in there, Diane.
I didn't get a 0 though. I thought.
Jacob.
My favorite. Oh, sorry.
No. Hi, Adeo. Speaking to the test that you spoke of a little bit earlier, it reminds me of something that I heard you say at the Elevate conference that Carter and Bin did a while ago, and that was dream big, do the impossible, don't compromise.
Right.
We have a very social equity, community-driven, ecological-driven business. How do we bridge this gap between this very strong narrative why into a compelling and convincing story in the boardroom and to our VCs and to our investors to, say, we're not just focused on this one thing that is about, capital and making X margins. How do I convince you to say, I don't need 10 million, I need 100 million so that I can go empower her and her community to create change within it?
You can't communicate it, right? It has to be obvious, right? So you can't communicate it, right? You can't be like, we're great because we believe in this, right? You have to walk into the office and be like, whoa, this is what they believe in. And the first person that meets them, this is what they believe in. And then when they come in the boardroom, they sit down and this is what they believe in. And then you walk in and the way you brief them, the way you present the materials, this is what you believe in, the clothing you wear. You have to, that goes back to the story before. Yep. Like it needs to ooze out of your pores to the point, especially if you're going into, I have a friend who is going into sustainability and she would leave plastic bottles around everywhere. And I'm like, I really have trouble with you littering plastic bottles around and being like, I'm doing sustainable consulting. I'm like, and she realized
Maybe
that
she meant she's sustaining her own consulting business.
Right, well, she realized that this was a mistake and then went back and now lives a life where she went to the polar opposite extreme. But and you see it because you're like, why are you using used tin foil on your thing? And she's like, because you reuse tin foil to wrap sandwiches and food that I bring that I make at home, la la la. And and it's like, wow, you are really taking this seriously. And then because if you want to be the leader, right, and you want to get the $100 million, you've got to be the leader that people go with you. And capital will go with you if you are the leader. And if there's compromise, right, then it's harder for the capital that wants to believe to come and follow.
And by the way, this is why the reason that we like you to be pitching and focusing more on the business stuff is because you ooze all the rest of it. Yep. Like that happens naturally with you. Everyone knows what you believe in and it's very clear. So you just need to be able to talk about and show that you've got your head screwed on straight and the numbers make sense, right? Yeah. But that's why it's super valuable and it's why you're a good CEO for what you're doing, because everything that Adeo said, like people that meet you just know about that right away. It's very obvious.
This gets to kind of an important thing that I evaluate when I'm talking to a founder, and both JP and Jacob have this. It's you have an ability to kind of see how your why, like the what drives you, is going to influence the future. And you have a vision of the future that is generally different than everyone else. And when you talk about it, you very easily sell people on that vision. And that is, that's what gets investors and frankly, people that you're going to be working with. So, again, it all comes back to the why, but it's just another distillation of it. Yeah.
Any last comments on the why or advice to pre-founders out there?
Well, I would even say to founders as well, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a one-off exercise. You're like, I did my why, boom!
Done. Check that box.
It's an ongoing effort of self-reflection and self-awareness to try and penetrate, and it's layers of the onion, because even at my level and understanding the why as much as I do, I find that I sometimes self-sacrifice or self-destruct in a certain bad ways, and then I'm like, why do I do that? And so, even that I have the direction why, right? There are edges to it and layers, and so it's really an ongoing effort as an entrepreneur and frankly as a good steward of humanity to be thinking about these things on a regular basis and not, and one of the things that I do is, and I'll give this as a final tip. So I get a lot of stuff done. It's nuts. Like I'm in shock, and one of the tactics I've gotten to get really good and increase my productivity a great deal is about every 2 weeks, and it's not quite every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's every month, but it's 2 to 4 weeks. I sit down, think about everything going on in my life, and I literally write like a strategy statement. Like, I want to do this, 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 this. Then I turn that strategy statement, and these are big things I normally want to accomplish, like massively complex. I turn that strategy statement and I create like 3-letter codes into projects, and then I create tasks per project, and they're ordered in the narrative of the strategy statement. So like, I want to do this first. The first code will be this, the tasks will go first, and for whatever reason, like that sort of conscious exploration of why I want to do a certain set of things and how I want to do them and what I want to do, but starting with the why and refreshing that every 2 to 4 weeks, it's allowed me to do the impossible.
Well, I would also just like to point out that ever since I've known you, I've respected you for your work ethic, and you have worked harder and more hours than anyone I've seen. Like, trying to beat you into the Founder Institute office was a bitch. I only pulled it off like twice, I think. Anyways, I mean, it's thank you so
I
much
love
for
you guys.
coming on.
I give you a hug, but I don't want to hurt you.
Yeah.
I care.
Thank you so much for coming on, Adeo. Truly a pleasure, as always. Carter, do you want to?
No, I mean, I think that was some great advice. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point, but
I hope so.
Enjoyed the conversation. I think the why is a super.
Do you have a cot so I can stay over? And
Sure. I've slept on that couch
Actually,
right
you can
there.
sleep on the couch right there. How can people get a hold of you or reach out to the Founder Institute, or like, how would you recommend people?
At Adeo Ressi is Twitter. I don't use it too much. You can just go to fi.co. I'm really easy to find thanks to Google in my name. So it's really been a pleasure. I hope everyone learned something today and finds their own why and can have some tools not only to find the why, but to keep the why alive.
And if you're still watching, like this, share it, get it out there. People need to find their why. They need to make sure they protect against disruption. Rate us on podcast and YouTube. Michael?
Who's next week, Michael?
Biomarker, right? All right. We're bringing a startup on next week, so we'll try not to go too easy on them, and we'll actually maybe start grilling them.
Awesome.
Check us out next week. Until then, have a great weekend.
Thanks.